Introducing aPriori.
So much for the great introduction, Rick. And as he said, we really are trying to look at it from all perspectives. As he said, we started out looking at this from a should-cost perspective, and I believe to our core that is still, from a day-to-day basis, how we're doing it. But we've branched out quite a bit over the past couple of years. When I first came to this conference in 2019, I never would have imagined 3 years later that how far Carrier as a company would have come, both with aPriori, but throughout all of our business. As you can see, I'm relatively young, so the bio is reflective of that. So here's the agenda that I kind of want to go through today. I want to introduce Carrier. I know it's an old company, but a lot of people don't know all the businesses that we do affect on a day-to-day basis in everyone's lives. And then first off, I want to go through our aPriori implementation as it is today and show what we've been doing with it, how we've been laying the foundation for where we want to go next, showing the benefits to date, and then of course looking at our current trends, both in the marketplace, what Carrier is seeing worldwide, but also what the market is telling us. Lastly, I want to show what we want to do over the next 5-10 years with aPriori. I really want to take a long-term look at what we expect that we'll be getting out of this tool going forward. So starting with, what is Carrier? Well, as it is traditionally known, it is an HVAC company. Both residential and commercial still make up about 54% of our business, certainly. And last year alone, it brought in about $11.4 billion. But as you can see, we are much more than that. We are a fire and security company. We are a refrigeration company. We invested a lot over the past few years as the pandemic was hitting worldwide. We showed up and we helped bring more value into the cold chain and help bring that medicine to all parts of the globe. Fire and security, of course, as I said, it is actually not our smallest part of our business. It's actually the second smallest. But as you can see, we affect all parts from detection to suppression throughout both residential, commercial, and then everything in between. And because of that, last year was our 7th consecutive year of introducing over 100 products. That's actually probably the best stat that I like to brag about. Every year being able to do that, especially in this current market, as I'm sure a lot of you know, that is very tough. And then, of course, as you've already been seeing, sustainability, that is the theme going on now. And because of that, Carrier also has our 2030 ESG goals. The big highlight, of course, is the gigaton. We are focused on reducing our customers' carbon footprint by at least a gigaton over the next few years going into 2030, as well as investing about $2 billion in healthy, safe, and sustainable building and cold chain solutions. How are we going to accomplish this? Well, I hope by the end of today you'll say that we're doing a lot, but aPriori is one of the key players as part of our strategy going forward. All right, let's take a look at what our current aPriori implementation is. As you can see, 125 users worldwide, certainly a lot more than I would have ever expected. We started out only with about 7 seats total in 2019 going into 2020, and we've grown quite a bit from there. Me and my team only represent a very small fraction of what you're seeing on the screen right now. Most of these users are design users across the globe in different parts of the business, working on cold chain, fire detection, and everything in between. The global deployment is coached by me and my team traditionally, and because of that, I think we've done a really good job of controlling the process, controlling the training, and be able to really coach users into a different mindset that has really started to empower them. So, what about our current use? Well, as I said, from a central point of view, our value engineering team, who most of the members are actually here today, which I'm very happy about, most of them are at the core of this. I think the one thing that I've found out over the past few years is you really can't do these types of implementations without having a core team. It can't just be one person. Certainly I tried my best for a couple of years, but I found out that I need more hands. And I think over the past couple of years, we've really done a great job of trying to get them out there. Now, what about our central engineering team probably makes us so special, I would say? Well, first off, we have lab capabilities, a very traditional setup. You know, you have your teardown lab, 3D scanning, and a machine shop for larger teardown, so that way we can look at it from a should-cost point of view. This is not new to anyone here, I would expect, but certainly Carrier is relatively new to the game. 3 years ago, we did not have these capabilities. And then now we're looking at it from a design point of view. And using AP design, as I said, most of that 125 users that you're seeing are design users by nature. Very few are sourcing, and even smaller few are of me and my team. So because of that, every day we have design users that are using this in trying to deploy it, trying to do late development stage cost modeling as it's going through the traditional gates in both our PLM system, but also just in the design review process. You know, it provides the avenue that they need without having to go to quotations, but certainly, I mean, majority of the time, you're not going to cover everyone in a single day. So most of the time, you still have a lot of users going on and out for quotations, and of course, that's causing a lot of extra time in our design process. This is just a very quick overview of, you know, what it is that our team does. You know, 60% of our requests are actually coming from engineering now. I think if you had asked me a few years ago, that would have been more like 90% coming from sourcing and supply chain. So that certainly has changed quite a bit, and I would argue for the better. But, you know, we have a central request form coming in from all over the globe. It fills up our workspaces every single day. We get these requests on in, and we handle them in a very traditional manner, putting them into our project tracker. So this is all to say there's nothing, I would say, new here that you probably aren't already aware of or haven't already done at your company. So this is still a very traditional point of view of looking at aPriori, and then plus should cost and value engineering in general. What about benefits? I mean, it doesn't really mean much if you don't get anything out of it. And I think Stephanie did a great job of showing overall what aPriori has been bringing to all sorts of companies. But from Carrier in general, you know, $21 million in discovered value that we've harvested out of our businesses this year. And because of that, we're able to invest that back into our businesses and empower them to do even more innovation. And then, of course, design to value events. You know, this is relatively new to us, certainly this year, but me and the team, we go around the world to different factories, different research and design sites. So that way we actually are on the ground and we actually coach the users. We look at a product, tear it down, and try to actually create a new value stream going into the next year for these teams to know what to go after. Now, how does aPriori fit into that? Well, aPriori is the tool that we use to validate these ideas. It's not enough anymore just to come up with an idea. You have to actually have a real idea that's validated, and that's where aPriori has been really key for us. And then, of course, as I said earlier, you know, 125 users worldwide. We are approaching, you know, our upper limit as far as users go, and that's kind of what you would want. You don't want a lot of empty seats. Now, as I said, there's a lot of global trends going on right now, and I want to show what Carrier's global trends are. You know, these are what we're seeing, what we're reacting to on a daily basis, and I'm quite certain we're not alone in this. You know, you have climate regulation. This was mentioned before by Stephanie. This is what's kind of leading innovation, leading us into these different spaces now. And of course, urbanization. You know, we did have the pandemic, and I would certainly agree that I think some people did slow going into cities and probably even left. Don't blame them. But they are coming back. We have to look at cities now certainly as the hub of a lot of these workers. These are the places where most likely you will find jobs a lot more than going elsewhere. So that is why urbanization is still a growing trend worldwide. And then, of course, worldwide growing middle class. That has not stopped either. Certainly it may have slowed during the pandemic, but it is coming roaring back as well. And we have to be able to respond to that and have to be able to deliver products to this growing customer base worldwide. And then lastly, digitalization. You know, Carrier, we're an old company. I mean, over 100 years now we've been around, and certainly, you know, this probably wouldn't come much of a surprise, but I wouldn't say we've exactly digitized everything right along. So right now we're investing heavily into digitalization of both our products, but also becoming a solutions company rather than a product-oriented company. I think this is something that a lot of companies are going to be doing going forward because of the way that the current market is reacting, and also helping to insulate from the inflation risks that we're seeing worldwide. What's the market trends like? And this is probably the one slide that I probably had the most hands in, but I think it's important to look at because a lot of these aren't actually good metrics, I would argue. First off, productivity regression. Productivity, I think a lot of people saw in the pandemic, actually did rebound quite a bit, and in large part, I would argue that was because people were working from home, they were a little bit happier, different change of pace. It's gone back down again, and it's following the long-term trends. TFP, which is total factor productivity, that's the metric that we measure the market productivity. It's going down still, both in the US and globally in the Western countries. And because of that, from a productivity standpoint, we need to find ways to make people more productive, and you can't do it in people, you're gonna have to do it in the tools that empower them. Sustainability stagnation. I mean, let's be honest, I think a lot of people here would expect that this would actually be the reverse. I'm here to say it's not. For the second year in a row, according to the UN and other organizations around the world, our sustainable development goals have stagnated. For the second year now, between the war in Ukraine and several other global events that were highly unforeseeable, sustainability is fallen flat again. And because of this, we have certainly the COP summits going on. I would probably go around the room, and I don't think a single person could name me something that came out of the COP summit last year that's actually been implemented. So because of that, it's falling on us to actually take care of the sustainability portion. It's not going to be left up to governments anymore. And then lastly, data sharing made easy. In particular, when it comes to data sharing, in the past, everyone understands that you can encrypt data, and that keeps it private. That's your IP. But it's not an either-or question anymore. A lot of the technology that we use every day is empowering us to be able to encrypt it and still being able to use it. Technology such as fully homeomorphic encryption, in which now you have your data encrypted from an input side, and then you are still able to analyze it without being able to reverse engineer it back. Car companies across Europe are now using these technologies to be able to group their data together, to do data sharing everywhere and be able to foresee things that they just couldn't before. And then complexity reduction. A lot of people look at that and say, well, isn't that a good thing? I would argue it's not. In particular, when it comes to economic complexity, this is the diversity and ubiquity of the products that companies and both countries export worldwide. The US has fallen, it keeps falling down in this metric. We first started out as being 7th worldwide, we're now down to 13th. That means that we're selling less diverse products, and more countries are actually exporting similar products. That means that from a long-term standpoint, economic growth is not to follow. We need to actually empower more innovation. We need to make more diverse products, make that next generation leap in our product portfolios if we expect the US and other countries in the West to be able to see more long-term growth. So that brings us to aPriori. And I just threw a lot at you, certainly. I mean, you probably are thinking, well, how does aPriori affect any of that? I would argue that aPriori is going to be the tool, well, especially at Carrier and other companies, on how you're going to be able to get over the crust. Because we have so many tools that live within this platform now that what we're seeing at Carrier in particular is that our value streams that we use on PLMs, on ERPs, MRPs, all these systems that from a 20th century perspective and early 21st even, work great. There's nothing to take away from what they've been able to accomplish, what companies in the past have been able to do with these tools. But what they haven't been able to do is really take that into the next decade here and really being able to combat a lot of those global trends that I showed earlier. As you saw, productivity is still going down. Sustainability, though we may commit to it, is certainly not being brought up to snuff. And then, of course, now we have all these new technologies around data sharing that aren't really being utilized by most companies. And we're struggling on an innovation space as well. So what can we do to maybe create the next value stream? What could we as people here do in our own companies? Well, this is what I would argue. AP Design and AP Generate, combining with our PLM systems, are going to empower our design engineers. I hear a very common trope around design engineers don't want to use aPriori. As you know, it's true. They don't want to use it. I've seen it myself. You can whack them over the head all you want with it, but they're not going to do it. So what can you do to get them to use it? Well, the key thing that I think we all have seen that does work is if you take their work stream, whatever workflow they're doing, you transform it and make them use it without them even knowing that they're doing it. And that's where PLM integration certainly comes into. AP Report and then Power BI integration, this is where AP Report, AP Analytics, this is where this really comes in home for both sourcing and supply chain, but also your management teams. Because you're able to create your own custom report and you're able to harvest all this data, now you can do all sorts of computations and metrics around it. And especially for a management team, you want that data as soon as you can, and that's why you need something as seamless as AP Report and then your Power BI integration with your own systems. Then that brings us to AP Pro and cost outlier analysis. You know, and this is where your central teams, that's where our value engineering teams come in, our should cost teams. These are the people that are going to be helping to manage this workflow going into the next decade. Especially at Carrier, we're looking at it now as a way to do something I'm calling cost outlier analysis, not in a traditional sense though. I argue that what you should be doing, both with Power BI, AP Analytics, and all these new tools, is you should be using linear regression technologies. These are not new. It's simple math that you can go through and find the correlation to be able to see across an entire BOM and be able to look and see what is outlined on your contract. You shouldn't have to do a should cost analysis on every single thing. It's just impossible. We can try, but it's just not going to work. It's not a valuable sense of time. Because of that, what you should do is use something less like a sledgehammer, more like a surgical scalpel, and be able to go through an entire BOM and seeing very visibly what is outlined compared to your data set that you are harvesting every day. And then finally, AP Pro and Zero RFQ agreements. I mean, I know Alstom is here. Certainly they're the pioneers in this, and I know a lot of companies are looking into this, and Carrier is no different. Right now we're trying to pilot one with a sheet metal vendor in the US. I think it's going to be going very well. We're working through the agreement phase and should have something hopefully in place later this year. And they're not going to be alone. We've already identified at least 5 other suppliers across the US and across the world that we do want to work with going forward to really start to generate these things. And that's where sustainability comes into play, because for us, as you saw, we have a gigaton goal, and certainly I'm going to be talking more about this later this afternoon, but that gigaton goal is only as good as what you can get from your suppliers. And it's only as good as the data that you get from them. And most of the time, suppliers don't want to give you the data. And I can completely understand that. They don't want to show you the material breakdown. So what are you to do? Well, that's kind of where aPriori is going to have to come on in. You're going to have to model it. You're going to have to do a product energy assessment, and then you can feed that into whatever LCA tools that are out in the marketplace. Certainly, we know of many. You know, I'm sure we can name off of the top of our heads at this point. So what are the workflow steps that we propose in this next value stream that we at Carrier are investing so much time into? Well, you know, as I said, design teams use the PLM system integration to get instant feedback. We can look at this to do carbon and cost avoidance data sets, because now as they go through the PLM system, we'll see on each revision, all right, does the cost get better? Does the carbon assessment get better? And this can all feed back into the PLM system, which of course then we can generate more data around, more analytics. The cost engineering team is then able to manage the cost models and check parts. Really right now, the value engineering team has been traditionally a should cost team, as I said. That needs to transform. They can't just be a should cost team. It can't be just you get a request from somebody and then they send you a part to tear down, or you work on a new design. It has to be something bigger. It has to be that your team is actually the cost data personnel that manage that on a day-to-day basis, and all they should really be doing is maybe some competitor analysis, certainly, but also they should be looking at it from a perspective of, what do I need to do to get design engineers and sourcing to work together better? They need to be the people behind the scenes making this seamless transformation. And then you have your procurement team sending parts to the appropriate suppliers based on the models. Even if you don't have a zero RFQ agreement, I think there's a misconception that if you have that, then you're golden. If you don't, well, you're out of luck. That's not true at all. If you have the model, if you have the cost model coming out of aPriori, then you can make better decisions on which suppliers you should go to. The key thing to remember is that now that you have all this data, you got to do something with it. It can't just sit there. And I think in the traditional sense, most companies, that's what they do. They generate data, it sits around, and then they pat themselves on the back and say, job well done. It's not enough anymore to do that. You have to actually use the data, and that's why we propose that procurement teams use this data to make better assessments on which suppliers, more strategic suppliers, do we go to? Who's the least carbon intensive supplier? Who's the closest one from a lead time perspective? These are the questions that you can now answer using aPriori data. Suppliers receiving in manufacturable parts faster. I mean, it's no secret, as I said, we're an old company, so sometimes we have designs that I would say are probably not as kosher as they once were in these times. And because of that, they're not being able to manufacture without extreme cost being baked in just because it's such an old design. So using using AP Design and these tools, now we're able to make manufacturable parts right on up front. This doesn't mean that you don't do your traditional manufacturing analysis, but this is kind of like the quick step that you can do right away and you send it out the door a little bit faster. That's all we're talking, trying to get it out the door just that much faster. And then, of course, AP Workspace, we're extremely excited about this new tool. Being able to collaborate across the tool just in my own team, it's going to be a game changer for us. This is something that we've been looking forward to for a very long time coming from aPriori, and being in the cloud is how this is now empowering us. And then, of course, parts being purchased at a fair cost, and also enhanced analytical data is readily available for anybody to look at across the business. And then here, I really want to show what are our forecasted benefits, because again, unless there's benefits, this really does not mean a heck of a lot to anybody. And here, as you can see, what are we projecting? We're projecting upfront costing, manufacturing carbon data in the PLM. This is the central hub where all your companies work day in, day on out from an engineering perspective. So let's make sure that all the data is in there. And then we look at our viable parts are received by suppliers more quickly, and of course improved alignment with supply chain. The supply chain and engineering traditionally, I think, at least at Carrier, haven't always gotten along. And I think part of what can be done using a value stream that brings everyone together up front is now what we can do is everyone's in harmony. There's no more infighting. You're breaking down the silos is the key to getting in further into the 21st century and being able to do things like this. Decreased time to market, more time to innovate. As I said, economic complexity measures are down across the Western Hemisphere. And because of this, I would argue that we need to find new ways to innovate, new ways to get things to the market faster, new ways to make better products. And that's where AP comes in. aPriori is at the forefront of this. And then, of course, enabling quick reaction to market conditions. I mean, the market's changing every day. I don't need to tell anybody this. So because of that, you need that data that's being harvested to be able to get there in time and be able to change your business, maybe on a flip even at times. Well, that's everything that I wanted to talk about today. Certainly, I am here for today, tomorrow. I invite you, if you have questions, please come talk to me. I'd love to talk to anybody about it. And the one message that I do want everyone to take home from this is you have a traditional value stream that is great at what it used to do. It's great at the market that we had even 5, 10 years ago. It's not enough anymore. That is why we invest so much time in aPriori every single day. And that is why I would argue that if you can, go home, start analyzing your value streams, seeing what you can do to build in better time for innovation and sustainability. Thank you.
aPriori. making profitability and sustainability a reality for a better world.